I begged my ex-husband to take me back, but he said he couldn't because I broke his heart. I don't know if this is the right place to write this, but the name of this group fits my situation perfectly. I'm posting because my therapist suggested that I should get everything out, and Reddit seemed like the right place, so here I am. I'm 42F cheated on my husband 3 years ago. 42M cheated on my husband 3 years ago. It destroyed my family, and I regret it every day. My husband and I met when we were 19 years old. We had no connection to each other, and for 22 years I thought we were happy. Of course, he has his own worries. It destroyed my family, and I regret it every day. My husband and I met when we were 19 years old. We had no connection to each other, and for 22 years I thought we were happy. Of course, he has his own worries. It destroyed my family, and I regret it every day. My husband and I met when we were 19 years old. We had no connection to each other, and for 22 years I thought we were happy. Of course, he has his own worries. It destroyed my family, and I regret it every day. My husband and I met when we were 19 years old. We had no connection to each other, and for 22 years when he loses his temper, he feels bad about everything that bothers him, and I understand that. I can be like that too, and out of anger I say things to him that I don't mean, but he never holds it against me. We have a great sex life, and he would certainly like to have more of it, and he works hard every day to make that happen. But as a full-time mother of 5 girls and 2 boys, I feel exhausted. When we don't have sex, he makes his views known. In retrospect, I think we could have enjoyed sex more often, and that annoys me. But he did help around the house. He worked 60 hours a week, making sure I got a long weekend sleep and that when I woke up, the house was clean and breakfast was ready. As the older children went off to college, I felt empty and a little crazy. I still had 2 sons, but they were in junior high school and didn't need me. In hindsight, I should have rejected my husband's advice, taken up hobbies and done many different things. My husband was a bit portly and slightly overweight, but handsome. As for me, I weighed between 150 and 210 pounds depending on the year I started working again. I felt good at 160 pounds. I hadn't worked for 21 years and it felt good to be back. After a few months, I started hanging out with a young 25-year-old colleague in the office. My husband encouraged me to do this because I lacked female companionship. I had always pushed him to hang out with his colleagues, so I should do the same. The girls made me think I could do better, that my husband wasn't sexy enough, that I was trapped, and even one of my male colleagues said my husband was a beta pretending to be an alpha, and I believed him. I thought my husband was all talk. Yes, I had seen him argue with people before, but they were just talkers who didn't dare to confront him. But I've never seen him fight. I don't know where this is coming from. I love him and he loves me. Our friends always tell me how lucky I am to have him, and I do feel lucky. However, for some reason, their words made me guess my love for him in my mind. Every time I talked to my colleagues, this feeling continued, and eventually I started flirting with the same male colleague. He called my husband Beta. He was the same age as me, strong and handsome. As time went on, one thing led to another. He took the initiative first and I went with the flow. We had sex whenever we could. I felt younger and more attractive, and I treated my husband like shit. I rejected his SXX, mocked his weight, and even tried to make him think he was crazy when he questioned our relationship. I don't know where this came from. Looking back, I don't know why I did it. I don't know who that person was. I realized how bad it was when my husband shattered a glass with his hand at dinner and stared at me with hate-filled eyes. "You have a hickey." He spat while wrapping his hand around it, then went to the emergency room. My sons watched me in shock, and my oldest ran away before his eyes turned red. I called my lover and yelled at him. He told me he felt sick. That was the first time I regretted my actions. He came home in the middle of the night, looked me straight in the eye and asked me how long I was going to deny it. I wanted to refuse, but I saw the answer in his face, so I told him it had been 4 months and your ASC is DCK. I didn't say anything. He walked around me and went to my ear, lowering his voice and telling me, "I want a divorce from you, damn SLT." I was so angry. He had never spoken to me like that before. I could only cry, especially when I noticed our sons staring at me at the foot of the stairs. They were looking at me with such angry eyes. I was furious with him for doing this in public. I should be angry with myself. I should feel disgusted with myself, but I wore these blinders. My husband immediately checked them out like flipping a light switch, and his love just disappeared. My female colleagues supported me and convinced me that I had made the right choice and that I would have more time for my lover. I accepted this argument. I didn't want to separate, but my husband moved out of the house and moved to an apartment half a mile away. My sons ignored me, and my daughters refused to speak to me. Despite my protests, my lover began to come to the house, which angered the children, who refused to leave. My lover is healthier than my glasses, but he just smiles at my lover. He hasn't told him yet, but soon. When they leave, I'm so angry with my lover that I tell him that his behavior is senseless, that he just ignores me until he's had enough and then yells at me, and it scares me. My lover soon started telling me what to eat and what to wear, making these distressing comments, and no one listened, and I let it happen. After the divorce was finalized, we negotiated a 50-50 payment plan directly to buy his half of the house. We have joint custody, but the children want to live with him. I haven't seen my eldest daughters for a long time. They don't return my calls. It wasn't until he mentioned it that I learned one of the daughters was in a serious relationship. It all felt so surreal. Watching him sign the papers, I felt a sharp pain in my chest. When he took off his ring and placed it on the document, I felt a lump in my throat. As he left, I realized I never apologized to him. I grabbed a pen, stared at the ring, and in that moment I realized how much I had done wrong. I had ruined my marriage, my relationship with my children. I thought I was in an abusive relationship. I cried so hard I couldn't breathe, I was incoherent. But in the end I signed it. A week after the divorce, my lover hit me for the first time. I was telling him about my day and I hit the bedside table and knocked over his phone. He looked at me, slapped me and said I was clumsy. I called my ex-husband and the first thing he asked was if he had touched my children. I told him no and he hung up straight away. I cried a lot that night, and soon my lover started to get physical without restraint. This went on for 2 months and at the time I felt that I deserved it. My ex-husband had never hit me, but my lover did, and in my eyes that was karma. She only stopped when he hit my daughter, who had just come home from college. She was the only one who wanted to stay in the house. The 2 older children stood by their father. She made a phone call and my ex-husband walked into the room and punched my lover for free, then beat him into a bloody mess. My ex-husband kept his face expressionless, without any emotion. I had to beg him to stop. He looked at our daughter's bruised face, asked her which hand he had used to hit her, and then stamped his right foot, breaking it. It was over. My ex-husband dragged him outside. He never looked at me once, never acknowledged me. He took him to the hospital and told the emergency room that my lover had fallen down the stairs. My husband stood by my lover's side. I don't know what they said, but the next day my lover quit and left me. I continued to work, and my ex-husband started messing with my single friends, even a few coworkers, one of whom was the one who convinced me to cheat. Afterwards, when my colleague bragged to him, I realized that he often bragged to other girls about how he had dumped her, kept asking me about him and why he didn't return her calls. I was sad to learn that he did this. I think he did it on purpose. I dated a few men, but it never lasted long. I was a single mother of 5 and seemed to push men away. Then there was SX. In retrospect, even my lovers, none of whom could satisfy me, could not compare with my ex-husband, which makes me wonder why I allowed this to happen. I was so happy, how did I let myself be manipulated? I don't understand why it was always quiet in my house during this time. My children were either locked in their rooms or with their father. Except for my 3rd child, my daughters refused to speak to me, which made me very sad. My ex-husband saw this and called a family meeting, summoning all the children to the house. I was happy to see all the children at home, but most of them didn't want to be there. He started telling the children to talk to me, and my youngest son called me a bitch. This shocked me and made me very sad, and my ex-husband slapped him in front of me. "Have I ever called your mother a bitch?" he shouted. Our son shook his head. "Your mother takes care of you, she loves you, you have to respect her. What happens between us is none of your business, none of your business, you all have to start respecting your mother, am I clear enough?" He looked at all our children, that was enough to say it all. My relationship with the children began to improve during the 2nd anniversary of our divorce. We were civil, we talked with a smile. He often came over to fix things, talk about the children. For a while my husband came back, I leaned over, but he pushed me away and said no and walked away. A month later, he started dating our little teacher. She was 10 years younger than him, they had a lot of common interests, she was very charming. When they were dating I tried to behave decently, but seeing the way he looked at her just like the way he looked at me, And the way he caressed her to make her laugh, she was the center of his attention. I understood why people envied us, why they kept telling me how lucky I was, this devotion, why I never noticed. When I heard they were getting married, I broke down. I woke up with him next to me, helping me brush the mess out of my hair. I cried, begging him to forgive himself for ruining our family. He didn't say anything, just let me talk while holding me. He visited me every day, only leaving me for a moment to speak to his fiancée, who even came to visit me. I didn't deserve their sympathy, and her kindness even went so far as to find me a therapist, who they paid for. My therapist was blunt, saying she thought I was having a midlife crisis, that instead of talking to my husband, I was letting these younger women manipulate me. She explained that they wanted to destroy my marriage because they were single, likely never to marry, and were easily attracted to me. Pain needs company, and the main instigator had messed up my ex, as it only proved after a few months of therapy. Seeing that I was still struggling with this, she suggested that I create a disposable account on Reddit to let out the pain, which would heal me and be a unique alternative to group therapy. My new ex-wife is a lovely person who often comes over to visit and chat with me to make sure I'm doing okay. As much as I want to hate her, I can't because she's so nice, and their twin boys are adorable. My ex-husband also comes over to make sure I'm eating enough and to tell me that no matter what happens, I'll always be his kid's mother and he'll always be there as a friend. Last Saturday, he even came over to tuck me in while he cleaned the house and made me breakfast, which made me cry. I miss him so much, my husband, my best friend. To this day, I can't understand how I could have been manipulated so easily. I'm so lonely. My children are here, but we're not as close as we used to be. They came anyway. The person I want most is not him. He's moved on, and I'm the reason I go on. But I deserve this, I deserve this. Editor. I have spoken to the person who left the message, and I want to set things straight. I want to talk about what my ex-partner went through, but I don't feel it's right to talk about his pain. I tried to make amends countless times, but he didn't want anything to do with me. No matter what I did, my ex-partner didn't want to leave me, and that didn't help me at all. He wouldn't let me go. I felt trapped in the affair. I was in a strange fog, it's hard to explain, like my soul was out of my body. It was supposed to be the last time, and he left his mark on me. I remember when I begged my ex-husband to give me another chance, he found out a few days later, and he just looked at me and walked away. Only 3 times did he try to speak to me politely: when signing the divorce papers, when I called him when my partner hit me, and the day after he almost killed my partner, the day he blamed me for everything. As I mentioned before, he has a habit of letting everything ferment before exploding. He was furious at my stupid choice, said I ruined him, said he couldn't afford to mourn our marriage because he needed to be strong for the kids, and I just cried because I hurt this man, this strong man who would find a way to freeze the hell out of things if I asked him to. I apologized, but he didn't want to hear it. He told me that my AP would never bother me again, and then he left. There was no communication between us for a year, and until then, he didn't want anything to do with me. When he started fooling around with some women I knew, I just let him go. I knew why he did it, and I felt it was deserved. After that family meeting, he started to behave a little more civilly for the sake of the children. During that time, I really realized everything I had destroyed after the family meeting. My children started to talk to me again. The youngest one took the longest, but I worked on it. Oh God, I worked hard to make up for it with the children. I needed to repair the rift between me and them. They were my top priority. The kids saw my efforts and they slowly opened up, but the following year, things were not so rosy. Seeing my children laugh at home while my ex-husband joked around or helped with the housework, cooked on the grill and danced with the girls, I thought that as long as I tried hard to show him how sorry I was, I could win him back. I did everything I could. I asked for couples counseling. I started over. I wore every dress he bought me. I sprayed on his favorite perfume. I did my hair the way he liked it, but he just ignored me. That's why I tried to kiss him that day. I thought for a moment he would let me, but he stopped me. I cried. I begged him. He just looked at me. He told me he couldn't be with me because I broke his heart. He would never kiss me because I tasted of another man. He will never hug me because I let another man touch me. He will never sleep with me because I allowed another man to sleep next to me. I pointed out the women me because I hurt his heart. He will never kiss me because I have kissed another man. He will never hug me because I have let another man touch me. He will never sleep with me because I have allowed another man to sleep next to me. I pointed out the women he had been with after the divorce, and he said categorically that that had happened after the divorce. What I did was during our marriage. Your body and heart belong to me, just as mine belong to you. You have destroyed all this. I just want to be his friend, but it is difficult. I married this man for more than 20 years, but destroyed it all within 6 months. I desperately need female friends and long to fit in, and this is a midlife crisis. I look back and I don't know who that person was. Nothing matched my character. My third child understood me, and if she hadn't been there for me, I probably would have ended my life. She kept me sane and safe. I don't know that day she was home. Usually the abuse happened when the kids were away or when we were at work. I was always afraid they would leave. Yet I allowed him to do this to me because I felt I deserved it. That night I defended myself. I told him to leave, which he didn't like at all. When he hit me and pressed me against the wall, my daughter suddenly appeared, jumped on his back, and when he hit me again, he flipped her over and slapped her on her back. I hit him and ran into the garage with my little girl. He knocked on the door and she called her father. When my ex-husband arrived, he almost crashed through the garage door, and I had to stop him or my ex-husband would have killed him. His new wife was a gift from heaven. She allowed him to love again and to be himself again. I didn't want to be part of his new life, but she insisted that she too had been in an abusive relationship before meeting my husband. She didn't want hostility and trusted me. She made it clear that she had claws, and that she wasn't afraid to use them if I crossed a line. The children all loved her and she was their English teacher for most of them. After all, I only have these moments of overwhelming guilt, which are so painful for me. Yes, I still work for that company and eventually became a manager, firing those women I knew. I knew all their dirty secrets, so getting rid of them wasn't a problem. I just miss everything about the past. Now I'll tell the next story. Story 2. After what my sister did, I abandoned my family and fiancé. I need a little advice because I don't know what to do anymore. I'm 21. He proposed to me when I was 21. He is the light of my life. We have known each other since preschool and our families are very close. He comes to dinner with us every day and vice versa. He has no siblings, but I have 2 older sisters, which is very important because he is very close to them too. We grew up together, and when we started dating, our parents celebrated for weeks on end. He helped me overcome a lot of anxiety, even when I gained weight and my mother scolded him, saying he would leave me. He told her that he loved me for who I was and not how I looked, although he claimed that to him I was the most beautiful girl in the world. We were engaged for only 6 months before it happened. My eldest sister, we called her Nikki, was a very cold person who never showed any emotion and only opened up to my fiancé because she saw him as a brother, and he had helped her through many dark times, such as drug addiction and breaking the law. My sister and I never saw eye to eye. I loved her dearly because she was my sister but didn't like her as a person. She told me that she wanted to take me clubbing because we had never been clubbing together before, and she felt sad that she felt distant from me. I agreed and we went to the club that night. Clubs aren't really my thing, but after a few drinks I loosened up a bit and started having fun. The night went well until Nikki spotted a guy across the room and claimed she wanted to climb up a tree to get to him. She walked over to him and came back a few minutes later with an unhappy expression on her face. I asked her what was wrong, but she didn't say anything. I pressed on because I didn't want our evening to be ruined. Then she told me that the man didn't want her phone number but mine. I told her that he was a loser, and that there were plenty of men around who would kill to be with a girl like her. But she didn't budge. She told me she needed to go to the bathroom and then we would leave. I waited for about an hour, during which I drank a lot of different cocktails. Then I started feeling dizzy. I decided I would take a taxi home as I knew Nikki had gone, although I did bump into one of Nikki's friends, who she had briefly dated. He asked if I needed help getting a car, and I explained that I had called a taxi, and he said he was just leaving and we could share. I told him that was fine, and we walked out of the club together and got into the first taxi. I tried to get my phone out of my purse, but I felt increasingly dizzy. I don't remember what happened next because I passed out and woke up the next morning lying on a hard sofa with a splitting headache. I realized I was at Nikki's friend's house and my phone was on the glass table in front of me but broken. He noticed I was awake and got me some pills and water, explaining that I had passed out in the taxi and he didn't remember my parents' address, so he picked me up and brought me back here and put me on the sofa. I told him I needed to go home because my fiancé would be worried. He called a taxi and I left as soon as I arrived at my parents' house. At home, my mother, father, Nikki, my fiancé, and his parents were all standing in the living room. I thought they were worried about me, but as soon as I opened my mouth, my fiancé asked me how I could do this to him. I tried to explain that my phone had run out of battery, but then he started yelling and asking me how I could cheat on him. I was confused and didn't understand why he thought that. I tried to explain what happened that night, but I was always interrupted. Nikki then said that I was a liar and that I could be so heartless to someone who had done so much for me. And then she went on to say that I had been flirting with strangers all night, and then when she went to the bathroom, she saw me leaving with her friend. I told her what had happened, and she showed me the photos on her phone of us leaving with his hand on my back, leading me outside. Yes, the photo did look bad. I had drunk too much and I hadn't even realized that his hand was on my back. My fiancé was furious and kept shouting. Both he and his mother were crying. Then I asked Nikki to call her friend, who would confirm that nothing had happened. But when she called him, he told a completely different story. He said that I had begged him to take me back to his place and that we had had sex several times when he took me back. I was so angry I blushed and started crying and yelling at Nikki because I knew she had planned the whole thing to make me look bad. I begged my fiancé to believe me, but he just shook his head and left, and everyone else left at that point. My mother slapped me and told me to get out. I left and went to a friend's house where I stayed for a few nights. Those nights I called my fiancé and begged him to believe me, crying and saying that nothing had happened, but he wouldn't listen. He didn't return any of my calls or texts. My mother sent me a text message telling me that she was kicking me out, that she couldn't believe I would do such a thing, and a lot of other hurtful slurs. I don't think I can repeat them all here. She didn't even give me time to pack. She just threw everything out. I am now homeless and none of my family members would take me in because they chose my fiancé and mother. In less than a day and a half, I became a homeless bachelor and my world was taken away by Nikki's lies. For weeks, I tried every way to win back my fiancé and family's heart. But Christmas came and I went to my mother's house to try to reconcile, only to find myself sleeping on the sofa. When I arrived at my parents' house, I knocked on the door, but no one answered. My friend then called to tell me that she had just seen on Facebook that my family was celebrating Christmas in another state, and they had posted photos online of everyone there, my sister's parents, grandparents, and even my fiancé and his family. When I saw these photos, I couldn't help but cry, because they all looked so happy. I cried for days and nights and then decided to block them all. I even returned the engagement ring. My friend knew someone a few hours away who was looking for help, and he even arranged accommodation at the place where he worked so that I could rent a house at a cheap price and work at the same time. I wanted to start my life again because no one was on my side. They all left me and left me to fend for myself, and that hurt. I was able to move out quickly and get by just fine. The apartment was small, and I had to work more than 10 hours a day almost every day, but I still saved a lot of money. I no longer live in that apartment, I rented a better one, but I am still the assistant manager of the restaurant. It has been almost 2 years since I left the restaurant and I have not spoken to my family. I did not know what had happened to them until someone knocked on my door. It was my ex-fiancé who knocked on my door. I was so shocked I couldn't speak. All these feelings came flooding back. I just wanted to throw myself into his arms, but then I remembered the pain I had been in and wanted to slam the door in his face, but he stopped me and let me hear him out. He said Nikki had gotten married, and she admitted she had lied because she had found someone who loved her very much and realized what a terrible thing she had done. I asked him how he found me and he said my friends told him that my entire family was trying to contact me and wanted to see me. I told him I needed time to decide if I wanted them in my life. He left and I became a mess because I didn't know what to do. I know I will never forgive Nikki and she can rot in my eyes, but it's hard because my other family and fiancé don't know she lied. But I also feel like they abandoned me too quickly and didn't let me explain my side. I don't know if I should forgive them or not. Any advice would be helpful. Thank you for taking the time to read the update. Wow guys, I don't even know where to begin. I really appreciate all the support, advice, kind messages and rewards you have given. I wish I could thank each and every one of you personally, and I did try my best to reply to each and every message. You guys are amazing and I cried when I read all these comments. My heart has never been so touched by so much love and support. I'm really sorry if the update took too long. I was really shocked and didn't know how to react, so I never contacted my ex. I don't know what to do, But eventually he must have given my parents my number because they texted asking to meet. I never replied and planned to organize a Zoom meeting, but it wasn't necessary because they also showed up at my doorstep. My father did it when I opened the door and saw him standing there. I ended up throwing up and he insisted on cleaning it up. When we sat down, I suddenly burst into tears. I was so emotional that my father had been using the same cologne for a long time, so when I smelled it, it evoked all my memories. He tried to hug me, but I pushed him away and asked him what he was doing here. He went on to explain that he and my mother were getting a divorce. He said that the moment I left, he begged my mother to contact me, but she refused and said that I was behaving like a child. If I wanted to leave them after they had done such a terrible thing, then I could decide for myself. From then on, I asked him how long it took them to realize I was gone. He said they came home after New Year's Eve and planned to invite me over so we could talk, but by then they had contacted my friend, who told him I had left and she didn't know where I was. I asked him why he didn't listen to my side of the story and why they had dismissed me so easily. He started crying and said he never meant for things to get out of hand, and that he wished more than anything that things could go back to the way they were. I said that when they found out that Nikki was using drugs and had dropped out of high school, they didn't kick her out, but we went on vacation together to get her to focus on something other than drugs. On that trip, she became addicted to alcohol, and every time they would defend her again and again. He said he didn't know my mother would kick me out, and he thought it would only be for a few days, but then they made a last-minute decision to go to another state for Christmas, and my mother apparently assured him that I would be allowed to come home when they returned. I told him she threw away all my things, but he said they were all there and she lied. I asked him what happened to Nikki and he said she was dead to him and he didn't want anything more to do with her. But my mother kept crying and begging him to forgive Nikki because she was sick and they had already lost one daughter and couldn't lose a second. He stopped me from contacting Nikki and kept pestering my ex to find me. My ex-husband gave in, and when my father said that he had prevented me from contacting Nikki and told him where I lived, I asked him never to show up again unless I gave him permission, and he agreed. When I asked what would happen now, I said that I really didn't know, and that he had really hurt me deeply. Then I described in detail how much he had hurt me, and how it felt to see that they were so happy without me. We were both in pain. In the end we were both crying, but I was really glad to have gotten it all out. It felt like a heavy burden had been lifted from my shoulders. My dad said he knew a nearby neighborhood and would help me find a better apartment. He said he would help me find a better job, but I told him I would not leave this job because my boss had helped me a lot and I wanted to repay him at all costs. I said I didn't want him to do anything for me, but I wanted to reconcile, but on my terms, and it would take a long time to trust him again, and I probably never would. He said he would do anything to make up for his mistakes. I asked him why Nikki did it if she said anything. She said she thought my ex-boyfriend deserved to be happy more than I did, and she wanted to see him happy because he sacrificed so much in the relationship. She loved him like a brother and wanted the engagement to be broken off. That night, she had a friend come to the club to take me out so she could get the pictures and then drive me home so her plan would work. She said nothing happened. I slept on the couch, that's all. He played video games all night until I woke up. Apparently, my dad planned to bring my things from my mom's house to me, but I told him I no longer needed them. Then I went to ask Nikki's husband, and he said that my mother had kept quiet about the whole thing, but he had my husband's phone number and he wrote it down for me after my father had left. I decided to call Nikki's husband. I was sweating and felt really bad. What if I could hear her speaking on the phone? Anyway, when he picked up, I blurted it all out, which I deeply regretted because I should have explained it slowly to him. He sounded very confused, so I explained the whole thing again, and I even described her drug and alcohol problems in detail. To be honest, I was expecting him to give me a dressing down and defend Nikki, but instead he just let out a long sigh and said that it turned out he didn't feel she was entirely innocent. It turned out that she and his sister had always had problems, and she had been constantly lying and slandering his sister, which had caused a huge rift between them. His sister didn't even attend their wedding. I told him I was sorry, but that he should make peace with his sister because the problem was with Nikki, not her. We talked for a while and then he hung up. I'm not sure how he'll handle the information, and I hope he'll stop and leave her because he sounds like a really good person, and even his own sister is lost because of Nikki, so I decided to reconcile with my father. My mother has always controlled their marriage, so for him to get a divorce from her and cut ties with Nikki shows that he is serious about making amends. I don't think I will ever reconcile with my mother because she believes Nikki is also a victim. For now, I don't care to hear her excuses if she contacts us. I will update my ex's post again if she contacts us. I haven't had time to meet and talk with him yet, although my father mentioned that he wanted to come with my dad, but he told me that I would be overwhelmed if both were there, and that meeting separately would help to make a clear decision. He also mentioned that my ex-husband was arrested for assaulting Nikki's friend, and the latter lied about the whole situation of his arrest, but the charges were dropped a few days later. I will update the post again when I have time to talk to my ex-husband. Thank you all for being so patient, considerate, and kind.